we've got to have honest conversation about where we are and where the risks are, or we're never going to get to where we need to be. And we can't think about today. When we build technology, we're building for something that way out. We want to build for the future.
Welcome to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. In each episode, we dive into the world of industrial cybersecurity. Join us as we cover the latest trends, innovations, and practical insights as we talk with leaders and practitioners across the industry. Gear up and let's get into this week's episode.
Hi, I'm Craig Duckworth, and today I have the distinguished honor of presenting Shellie D'Angelo, who has an immense amount of wealth in the IT space. Shellie, why don't you introduce yourself, give us a little bit of background about what you've done, and kind of kick us off.
Thank you for having me, Craig. I appreciate it. I'm Shellie D'Angelo, and I'm a CIO and Chief Enterprise Architect, and I've spent the last 15 plus years working in manufacturing and distribution companies across the gamut: aerospace and defense, all the life sciences, tier one automotive, just doing what most executives only want to really do once, which is building and rebuilding the entire technology foundation of an enterprise from the ground up. So I say my job is to come in and turn our chaos into cash. And that's it in a nutshell.
Perfect. No, fantastic. And a lot of our listeners are in that same spot. They may be CIO, ISO, VP of IT that understand from a very high level and can provide that guidance, but not so much down in the bits and the bytes on the facility floor. So I think your perspective is going to speak to a lot of our listeners. So I appreciate your time today and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you.
So let's just kick it off and jump right in. So as you look at this emerging OT IT convergence space, what would you say is probably one of the leading things that organizations need to consider as they are building foundational, moving data from the plant into the enterprise to make a decision, whether that be governance, that be a risk decision? How would you advise someone to make sure that they're doing this appropriately?
I think we have to first understand our business and our data and all of our assets, because first, for me, data governance is critical. It is what helps drive and works in a symbiotic relationship with security, both information security and cybersecurity. So when we are bringing data in, we need to understand what data we're bringing in. What are the drivers for our business that are going to turn an ROI? What's really making a difference? So it's understanding what our business needs are, the key components, and then understanding the differences in between those systems, because how we store data and operational technologies. And when we talk about that, like PLCs, HMIs, SCADA systems, how we store and what data we store in those types of systems versus what we store in the ERPs, the CRMs, HRIS, manufacturing execution systems. How we store data there and what we store is very different. So I think it's understanding and pulling this data into some centralized location, whatever, data lake, data warehouse, whatever it may be, but understanding, pulling the right data in and understanding what we need to report on. But I think critically, we have to understand how the data is stored and just making sure that there's governance around it. For me, that's the most important thing, because that's where I think things are lacking in a big way. And that governance has a direct impact on how we report data, which means it's going to impact financially the decisions that get made.
I would agree with that. From an accounting background, I always hear garbage in, garbage out. So again, if the data is not accurate, either whether that is you're leveraging AI to help train a model to make a better decision, or you're using AI for efficiencies. Again, if you're making the wrong decision based on the wrong data, that implication is huge. So it's both sides of that. And we're seeing where I would say that we in the field are seeing most of these decisions driven from the top down. Are you seeing the same thing? What's your thought on that?
I definitely think it comes top down. And I don't say that to be disrespectful because I have the utmost respect for our entire C suite. But I think what happens at the end of the day, everybody's looking at revenue and how much we can make and how quickly we can turn. And it's we've got to change the mind shift. It is all about, or at least in my opinion, it's been about tools. What tool? We're spending all these tools, but it's not working. And that's the problem. We're looking at it from a tools perspective, and we have to get away from that. We've got to understand our business first, what our goals are as a business. And I'm not just talking about, hey, we're at 600 million today. We want to be at 1.2 tomorrow in 2 years or whatever it is, or that we've got to grow 30% year over year. It's understanding who we are as a business, what sets us apart from others, what we feel we can do to set ourselves apart, understanding the data that's most critical for us to protect, and not just, and I would say more importantly, not looking at it from a compliance standpoint, but looking at it from a business standpoint, knowing what impact it's going to have. So all that understanding, okay, knowing that if this data leaks out, it could cause a huge issue. Who are my 10 most important customers that are my needle mover? That if I lose any one of them, it's going to possibly cost this company its entire reputation. So once you've kind of figured those things out, it's then looking at our assets, the assets that we have today, physical assets, intellectual assets, understanding kind of what's under the hood today. So before you go out and buy the first tool, understand what we have today and what we have to fix. Because I have yet to go into any environment and see any environment that, has a strong grasp on data governance and in comparison security, cybersecurity, and has all those things lined up.
Yeah, no, you definitely touched on something that I think is important and most of our listeners will resonate with is you got foundationally, you have to know what you have. There has to be visibility into that environment. You can't base it off of a 10-year-old spreadsheet that John, who worked here for 30 years that retired last year, put together for everyone. What is a true, accurate inventory? What are those assets communicating with? What's the business impact of each of those asset or cells or zones or whatever that looks like? And how do you begin securing and protecting those different conduits within the organization? And then as that data reports up to a risk governance compliance committee or individual or however the structure is, again, following that data is important, but you have to trust the data. And it starts with what do I have? You can't, all of that other stuff is irrelevant if you don't know what you have and how it works.
Correct. And I think it's governing the data and even down into what I'm going to call data quality and data structure, because we all I say in the world of technology, we understand what we have to do to get data and pull data from our tools, whether you're running a SQL environment or whatever you're doing to pull the data out. But if you are storing data and you've got data structured in a system such that based on if we've used best practices and standard kind of TOGAF principles, this is how it should be stored, A, B, and C. But if you're not consistent in how you put that data in, so I hate to say it, but it's as simple as data entry. And I think it's communicating amongst the teams. And I think this is where IT becomes a very important support mechanism to other teams, whether it be customer service and sales or supply chain and logistics, regardless, to understand you own this data that gets put in, but this is how, from a governance perspective, it needs to get entered consistently every single time. Because when data is not, when you've got bad quality of data or data not being entered in, then that too affects your reporting. So you're going to end up either not getting data pulled that needs to get pulled, or you're going to get eh, things if the quality of the data entered has not been entered correctly. So all these things I think impact what we're doing.
Yeah, and I would agree with that 100%. It really has an effect if it's not structured and set up accurately. So as you look at from a very high level, from board down through CEO and the C-level executives, from a organization holistically, how would you say the decision-making process, if we want to call it that, has been so far? Or do you think that overall they're on the right path? Do you think that as we look at the way that the processes have been in the past versus where we need to get to be at that next stage? Are we 10% there? Are we 98% there? Or have we even opened the door to walk in the room yet?
I think it's somewhere in between 10 and the last one you said, if you want my honest opinion.
Yeah, and I think that the listeners want that's we want to know where you're at.
I mean, I think that's the honest truth, because what we think versus the reality is vastly different. It's different from the North Pole to the South Pole. And I think one, while we would like to think that in much more highly regulated environments, things are exponentially better, I think the reality is, unfortunately, that's just not the case. They are better, but they're still lacking. And I think there is just this, I think there's a fear there too with communicating openly and being transparent with CEOs. They don't want to communicate to the CEO. And then if they do, the CEO doesn't want to tell the board. There's like this fear there. But the problem is that's what's got to stop. We've got to have honest conversation about where we are and where the risks are, or we're never going to get to where we need to be. And the thing is, you can't think, and you and I know this, we can't think about today. When we build technology, we're building for something that way out. We want to build for the future. And so before you can add on the wonderful tools that we've been using, I know I've been using artificial intelligence, robotic process automation, and ML for machine language for more than 20 years. But with all the, I will say, I'm going to call it hype around it that's come out now and everybody wanting to use it. It's, for me, I see it kind of like, if you want to relate it to other things in technology, think about when everything we used to do was on prem. We had our own server rooms or we had our own data centers on prem, and then came offsite data centers in cloud. And it was the big hype and it's the big thing, as if it was something so different. And all of it is, it's still servers at the end of the day. It's not, it's just that it's like renting space. I kind of, and I say, if you want to have it more simply, think about it like, we used to have cars that everything was on gas. And then I don't know if you remember, we had this whole water for gas concept. I know it just because my father was an engineer, and knew that you could build helix coals and run a car so they could use more hydrogen water than did gas. And then we moved into electric cars. And now we're continuing to grow on that. So if you look at all the changes, there's always a big hype when things first come out. But it's this technology that's come out, a lot of it, it's not that it just came out, it's been out. It's just how it's being used. And so that's, I guess, what I would say about AI. But it's a great tool, but you can't just put it in. You have to look at the very foundation. And for me, I would say where that plays a far more key role is because, not even taking into account quantum computing. If you look at AI today, just with the computing that we do today, look at how fast, from having just basic systems automation or basic system processes that we used to have, to now trying to put in AI, you can see how quickly it scales and how quickly it can scale bad data.
Well, I would say not only bad data, but I look at AI and for all of the advancements, and we do work with various hyperscalers. So we see firsthand as this AI infrastructure is being built out that are supporting OpenAI and Claude and all of the models that are there for all of us to use. I look at it from the opposite side of that. How quickly is AI supporting the bad actors to infiltrate into the environments that we, on the other hand, are trying to use AI to help us protect? So it's a double edged sword. And I would say organizations should be optimistically cautious in how they implement it to make sure they're doing it correctly with the right governance and boundaries around it. One, for garbage in, garbage out scenario, do we have the right data making the decision? And two, how are we making sure that what we have isn't being used against us by someone that's trying to get into my environment? Because again, if the nefarious actors recognize all of my protections are AI driven, well, I'm just going to turn the model upside down. And now AI knows how to get into AI to get into your network. So it's a vicious little circle.
It is. It's a very vicious circle. And that's where I would say, yes, you have all of your information security and cybersecurity, all those things come into play. So information access management, privileged access management, and privileged information management, all those things come into place. Policy as code, having CDNs, doing all the things that you can. But at the end of the day, I think what could help, I'm not going to say by end it's an end all be all, is making sure we have as much closed loop as possible. I think that's going to be a critical player. Unfortunately, because of the fact that we are going to quantum computing, so much of encryption, as we know, this whole true end of end-to-end encryption is not 100%. I mean, there's certain bodies, government bodies that see everything. And I'm not saying that some of that's not necessary because we try to protect ourselves as a country, but we've got to find ways to do as much as we can today and as quickly as we can to protect before we start bringing in other tools to help automate things and then start gauging how we're going to do these things in the next 6 months when even when the quantum encryption comes out, especially as it regards things like artificial intelligence and all of our security practices.
So let's shift focus just a little bit. If we were to look at organizational structure and trying to, for organizations that are beginning the journey, we got all the way on the far left of, holy crap, I don't know what I have. I got to figure out my visibility, to all the way on the far right of, I have a mature, rich organizational structure with governance, risk, compliance, all the way down to tools, technologies, and people to manage all that from 99 to zero, basically. As organizations look at themselves internally and they're, let's say, a little farther left than they need to be, how do they begin the process? Would you say, let's look at a tool to start giving you visibility? Or would you say, let's start on the other end and you need to have a risk governance compliance structure foundation that will govern all of those tools, technologies, so that you understand the long journey versus putting in something for a quick fix result? How would that look for organizations that are trying to figure it out?
I think first, for me, always is looking at what's underneath the roof. I mean, underneath the hood. I think you have to understand that because if you don't even have a very solid understanding of what's in your environment, then for me, all another tool does is bringing in risk. So for me to take an appropriate governance, risk, compliance view, you've got to first spend time to understand what you truly have. Now, that being said, certain environments are different than others. What I will say in the world of manufacturing, even sometimes those that are mature and have done a lot of work to assess that. And I would say have I'm not going to say, but a good idea of what's underneath the hood. I think sometimes there can be a combination of tools that are put in place that, when I say tools, things that we use in IT to kind of scan our environment to let us know what's truly in the environment, because there can be things that are in our environment that, like, and the simplest way I can say it is shadow IT, but things that are unapproved.
We see that all the time on the plant floor because at the end of the day, the manufacturing sites are tasked with get the job done. And sometimes the mentality is security gets in the way of production. So we will run into those shadow IT environments because it's how do I do this? And it flows back to that governance and that risk and the organizational's philosophy and values of is it important or do I have someone at the top checking a box trying to fix the problem?
Well, I mean, for me, when you're using shadow IT software that you've managed to connect up to your environment but hasn't been vetted, hasn't been secured, one, you've just opened the door to the, for me, to the World Wide Web. You've opened it up for everybody. So you might as well just go disconnect your firewalls. I mean, and I hate to be so callous sounding, maybe that's the unfortunate reality of what we're doing. And we need operational technology, but that's also a lot of that is very rudimentary technology compared to some of the others. So securing that technology behind closed doors is absolutely critical. And a lot of times we don't realize that because in manufacturing, PLCs are necessary, HMIs, SCADAs, and even cameras. I mean, I've come from environments where we use cameras on a production floor, and you're training using artificial intelligence, those cameras to look at things to help with your quality process so that you can produce faster. And all of those things are wonderful things, but that's where understanding the environment and understanding how those types of equipment work in their most simplistic form, because they're easy prey for bad actors.
Yeah. So as you look at that foundational, let's call it that area, are there certain signs or certain things that an organization could say, aha, maybe this isn't working the way it should? Cracks in the foundation where somebody could say, maybe this is going awry.
I think if you have the right people, and I'm going to say this and getting more to the human aspect of things, because a lot of people will say, well, I've got a team of people, I've got 200 people, and it's not about the number of people. I mean, certainly there's a balance in between number, but for me, I could run a much leaner team if I mean, a far leaner team, but it's having the right team. You've got to have, absolutely, got to have the right people. And I think that's one where things are suffering today, because I think companies look a lot, they're trying to make something match a checkbox. Well, do they have these things as if the fancy paper is going to make, when most of that, whether it's education or certifications, is all theory based. And there's very little, 2 or 3 years of experience. There's no real experience. That's where I say having the right people, seasoned people who have been doing this for so long, who have seen situations, so many situations, and can think out of the box and know how to act when they see something. I think if you have the right people, those people will start seeing patterns. There's always a pattern. And maybe you don't see it in the first 10 days or 15 days, but within 30, 60, 90 days, if you really start looking at things, you will see a pattern. And I think if we focus on looking at the patterns and relationships between things, we will have a whole different level of understanding
Yeah, I would say you're 100% correct. Especially from back to your have the right team. And we see this on a, I wouldn't say a daily basis, but we see this more so than not. Organizations that are trying to understand this on the plant, there isn't that right team that's readily available. The skill sets are not always there. The resources are not always there. You can't find somebody that's got 30 years of OT security experience because, well, it's not been around 30 years. And it's funny because you see a resume or a job posting, 10-year experience in OT cybersecurity. I'm like, good luck with that. So I understand that piece of it. But as we try and always tell clients, pick a partner that you're comfortable with, a partner that you've worked with in the past that has the skill set you're looking for. There's no reason to go down this road by yourself. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. The wheel's already there. We got four of them on the car. Let's use what we have and let's make this simple and truly reach out to peers or reach out to someone that's in a non-competitive environment and say, hey, how are you addressing this? How are you handling that? And try and lean on the industry that's here to help support you as you go down the road. It's not rocket science.
It's true. That's true. I mean, I, and the thing is, we've got to do this now. I mean, there's no more time. If businesses want to stop the bleeding and you want to stop tech debt, then you've got to understand technology can't be your afterthought. That has to be the leader of your business. And so, therefore, you've got to understand what all that means. And it can't be siloed out. It is everything together. It's your business applications, operational technology, your infrastructure. It's everything, and it's cybersecurity, information security, data governance, and most importantly, people. It's having the right, not only team of people in IT, but understanding that IT is your business partner. We have to work with all other teams to understand their needs and how we can better serve them.
That's been part of, let's call it the struggle in this IT/OT convergence, is the frameworks that IT uses and somewhat of their approach is different than that of the OT, mainly because I believe there's not an alignment from reporting structure within the organization. I report to IT, whose responsibility and first priority is data security. You report to OT, your first responsibility is operations and production. They're contradictory to each other. I can't, and so there's been that battle. How do we frame them both in a way that somebody steps back and says, okay, we're on the same team. We both work for the same organization. My goals and your goals are different, but together they are the same. How do we get that true interaction and achieve the holistic overall approach of governance, risk, and compliance while getting the outcome that the business unit needs and the security that the IT CISO need for the organization? That's where we've got to get to.
It is, but I think I think our job is to help people understand. A lot of people think, well, IT is not really bringing in money, but that's not true. We actually do turn ROI and we help you through scale and through security and all the things that we provide. So I think our job is to get in and help people understand how doing these things will have a financial business outcome and how doing it the right way will turn an ROI and will continue to help us meet our ROI goals or exceed them.
Great conversation, Shellie. One final thought as we kind of wrap this up. If you could give some advice to listeners out there that are in this journey, no matter kind of where they are in their space, are they just starting or they're kind of going through, if you could say, hey, here's a nugget that you should really think about that might help you on this journey. What advice do you think would be valuable to the listeners? What would you say that they should really kind of focus on maybe?
So I'll give you a kind of something I say, but I'm going to tell you. I know at the beginning I told you, and I was being kind of funny, but there's some more seriousness to it when I say turning chaos into cash. At the end of the day, the business has to make money, right?
Yeah, that's the goal. That their value to the shareholders is 100% number one, whether it's public, private. If they don't make money, they're not in business. So
Absolutely. So at the end of the day, they have to make money. And if they're not making money, we don't have jobs, right? So we care about at least even our investment being able to be secure in our job and have a job and put a roof over our head. So if we care about that, then you need to care about both the upstream and downstream impact that you have on that business and what you can do, not just in your typical day to day, but what can I do in the bigger scheme to help with this? Because we've got to stop this. Well, it's not my job. It's all of our jobs to do this and do this. So I would say, think about governance and speed. When governance is working well, it does not slow the business down. So that's what we have to understand. So we've got to be able to do things that give leadership confidence to move faster, to know that they are protected and that they can make decisions without second guessing the foundation and the data that they've been given. So that's just my very humble advice, just thinking about things on a bigger perspective.
no, it's great advice. And it goes back to the one thing that you touched on earlier of as organization, how do I correctly and accurately communicate the real risk up? Can't be afraid to tell the CEO what the true evaluation is. You can't be afraid as a CEO to tell the board what's our true position. Because when that happens, it leads to that false sense of security, which is a worse position than saying, look, our baby's ugly. Let's fix it. You can't put lipstick on a pig and it's still not a pig. So you got to be honest and move things in the right direction. So great conversation. Thank you very much for your wisdom. Hopefully the listeners got value out of this. So
Thank you for having me. I greatly appreciate it. It's been great.
you're welcome.
Thanks for tuning in to the Industrial Cybersecurity Insider. To stay up to date with our latest episodes, be sure to click the follow or subscribe button now. And if you found this podcast helpful or have a topic you'd like us to discuss, please leave us a review or let us know. Thanks again for listening. See you next time.